Hello, my friends. So today, I'd like to read to you an article from Teen Vogue magazine, of all places. And it basically gives an argument that the American university system is a right-wing institution. And essentially, the argument is that because university boards have the power in the university system, and the university boards are controlled by very wealthy corporate, financial, and industrial interests, then the university must be right-wing. And this, I think, promotes a misunderstanding that is very important for people to get straight, which is the misunderstanding is that big capital interests, interests and financial interests, they can't be truly Marxist, because Marxism and leftism is about equality. It's about workers' rights and the workers seizing the means of production. So these big capitalist interests can't possibly be Marxist. But okay, this completely ignores the fact that Marxism itself originates with big industrial capitalist interests. Marx himself was bankrolled by a major capitalist, and it completely, I think, misunderstands the true purpose of Marxism, which can be ascertained through just a little bit of critical thinking about the issue. Instead of taking the alleged purpose of Marxism and leftism at face value and saying, oh yeah, it's about equality, it's about workers' rights. Instead of just taking that at face value, we think critically about the issue, and we wonder, is equality even possible? Is communal ownership of the means of production even possible? And why is it that we see top capitalist, quote-unquote, elite oligarchical interests constantly promoting Marxist and leftist ideas? Why is it? And I think the ultimate answer to that is that really the purpose of Marxism and leftism is not these impossible, idealistic dream goals that are used to sort of recruit the useful idiots of society into doing the elite's bidding. It's not those dream goals. It's to destabilize society and allow for the continued consolidation of power into the hands of the oligarchical elite. And that is what we see has happened from the very get-go, the very start of Marxism being promoted. It's what we see continuing forward. It's what Marxism does. And so that is how we have to understand Marxism. We can't take their alleged values at face value. So I think it's worth reading a bit of this article and discussing a little more in detail. So let's begin. Campus culture, or campus cancel culture, freak out. This title is horrible. Campus cancel culture freakouts obscure the power of university boards. This op-ed argues that university boards are really in control of many core functions on college and university campuses. Now, I won't argue with that. University boards are in control. But the question is, if the university boards are controlled by big corporate financial interests, then why are these university boards promoting curricula which is founded on Frankfurt School style cultural Marxist ideas. Why is that? It's not because they're right-wing. Continuing on. Do American universities lack ideological diversity? Are they bastions of left-wing thought and hostile to conservatives? In early April, the Crimson, a student newspaper of Harvard University, published an article asserting that the university's conservative faculty are, quote, an endangered species, which quickly animated establishment concerns about the alleged lack of ideological diversity on American college campuses. Now, this is true. Here's the article where they show a pie chart of the political leanings of Harvard faculty, and close to 80% are either liberal or very liberal. 20% considers themselves moderate, which is basically just a less zealous version of liberal, and then only less than 3%, 2.9%, consider themselves conservative or very conservative. And this completely squares with my experience at university, both at a private school and state school. The vast majority of professors are heavily influenced by leftist ideology, and the curricula of all the classes that I've taken. I was a philosophy major, so I was in mostly humanities classes. The curricula was basically entirely structured around critical theory, which is a cultural Marxist way of deconstructing the norms of society, promoting social unrest, social change, agitating people against the traditional white European structure of society. So, yeah, this is completely true. But let's see what they say carrying on. The right, they say, is not underrepresented in higher education. In fact, the opposite is true. The modern American university is a right-wing institution. The right's dominance of academia and its reign over universities is destroying higher education, and the only way to save the American university is for students and professors to take back control of campuses. Now, there's so many questions that make nonsense of these sorts of claims, but one big one that comes to mind is if the university boards are truly right-wing and the university boards truly control the university system, why do they hire so many leftist professors? And why do they create curricula which are fundamentally influenced and structured around Marxist leftist philosophies? What sense does that make? Unless big corporate, quote, capitalist elite interests have always been behind Marxism. And that the purpose of Marxism has never really been to take power away from them. It's never really been about equality. You ever consider that as a possibility? That really it's about destabilizing society? Continuing on. Conservatives continually cite statistics suggesting that college professors lean to the left. But those who believe a university's ideological character can be discerned by surveying the political leanings of its faculty betray a fundamental misunderstanding of how universities work. Partisan political preferences have little to do with the production of academic knowledge or the day-to-day workings of the university, including what happens in classrooms. So the professors and their opinions have nothing to do with the day-to-day workings in university classrooms. How do people come up with this? How do people even believe something like this? Of course, the opinions of the professors influence the character of the school. And of course, they influence the way that the students come to shape their worldview. Students learn from their professors. They look up to them as authority figures. And when all of your professors, or at 80%, say even higher, say with the moderates included, it's more like 95%. When they have these sorts of leftist, Marxist influenced worldviews, this consensus exists in their experience of the university. That, of course, influences their opinions and shapes their worldview. There is no, quote, Democrat way to teach calculus. No, nor is there a, quote, Republican approach to teaching medieval English literature. Anyone who has spent time teaching or studying in a university knows that the majority of instruction and scholarship within cannot fit into narrow partisan categories. So this is implying that things like medieval English literature and calculus or math can't be influenced by politics. But of course they can. Of course they can. Cultural Marxism, critical theory, this type of leftist philosophy has invaded every subject. Not a single subject escapes this political influence, this social political philosophy. And that's part of their doctrine, is to get this worked into every subject. I made a video about this called the consilience of globalist doctrine, or something along those lines. Look at this from oxfordbibliographies.com, a book called Old English Literature and Critical Theory. It says, from the outset of the theoretical turn in the 1980s and 1990s, Old English studies appeared to be inimical to the adoption of newer critical practices introduced in the rest of humanities. Rooted firmly in the traditional methodologies of philology and historicism, scholars of Old English literature resisted the indeterminacy and uncertainty championed by critical theory in the wake of the post-structuralist revolution. They were prudently skeptical of applying models of subjectivity, sexuality, and identity developed in modern contexts to the cultural products of an era whose belief systems and modes of thought differ dramatically from those of the present day. Today, however, it is rare to find a work on Old English literature that does not draw in some way on the theoretically informed questions and conversations that animate contemporary humanistic inquiry. Post-structuralism and feminism have been especially productive theoretical models for the study of Old English, but every form of critical theory that has an impact on the humanities in the last 30 years has likewise impacted Old English studies. So, Old English, medieval English literature does not escape the reach of cultural Marxism and critical theory. And even, let's look at critical mathematics pedagogy. Critical mathematics pedagogy is an approach to mathematics education that includes a practical and philosophical commitment to liberation. And liberation, of course, is a code word for anti-white resentment, for the destruction of the traditional native social structures, political structures of white European societies. And critical mathematics pedagogy builds on critical theory developed in the post-Marxist Frankfurt School, as well as critical pedagogy developed out of a critical theory by Brazilian educator and educational theorist Paulo Freire. So, is this person too stupid to recognize that every subject today is influenced by Marxist critical theory? Is he too stupid for that? Or is he intentionally misleading his readers? Because part of the magic of critical theory and the way that it's applied in every subject is that they want their students to believe that their instruction and scholarship is not partisan, that it is not influenced by politics, that it's just scientific, it's just critical thinking, it's just an approach towards social justice. It's not political, it's not partisan, it's not Democrat or Republican. It's just thinking critically and analyzing. That's what they want people to believe. Because when you believe that, it's a lot easier for kids to sort of subconsciously absorb these ideas and become way more confident in them than they should be. Continuing on, moreover, gauging political preferences of employees is an impoverished way of understanding the ideology of an institution. To actually do so, you must look at who runs it. And in the case of the American university, that is no longer the professoriate. So it goes on to say, basically, at this point in history, the university board has the vast control, the vast majority of control over the way that the university is structured, and that brings us to the point, which is, if the university board is composed of elite financial interests and basically what people would consider capitalist interests, and yet they are promoting leftism, Marxism within their curricula, and hiring overwhelmingly liberal professors, and that the culture that is being promoted within the university system is overwhelmingly leftist, Marxist. How do we make sense of this? We make sense of this. I mean, I had these pages opened up, by the way, just to show you some of the. It says here at Harvard, the board of overseers includes senior leaders from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, McKinsey and Company, Google, the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. It's likely that boards with a substantial number of corporate managers, they say, regard long-term institutional interests as including vehement opposition to the unionization of graduate workers and a sluggish response to students and alumni calling for divestment of Harvard's assets from fossil fuels. So, point is, I got these tabs up to show you. Goldman Sachs website, they have this page promoting Black Lives Matter and inclusivity and supporting black communities, always capitalizing the B for black, by the way. Promoting diversity, inclusion, equity. Google also, commitment to racial equity, building sustainable equity. And equity is basically the equality of outcomes for different groups of people. Why is it that these corporate interests, these big corporations, are promoting? Oh, and by the way, I have also these pages just to support. Critical theory is something that is within every single university these days. This is not. I mean, I don't know if you remember the recent controversy where Trump tried to pass an executive order to cancel the funding for programs that mention white privilege or critical race theory on the basis that it constituted divisive, un-American propaganda. Joe Biden rescinded the order. So we have the President of the United States supporting critical race theory. How do we understand or make sense of the fact that at the very highest levels of politics and corporations, corporate interests, financial interests, why are they all pushing Marxism, Marxist theory, pushing for equity, equality? How do we make sense of this? Here's a little segment from a certain book that I'm not going to mention, but I think you could see it on the screen. In the first protocol, far back in ancient times, we were the first, we being the learned elders, were the first to cry among the masses of the people the words liberty, equality, fraternity, words many times repeated since those days by stupid poll parrots, who from all sides round flew down upon these baits, and with them carried away the well-being of the world, true freedom of the individual, formerly so well guarded against the pressure of the mob. The would-be wise men of the Goyim, the intellectuals, could not make anything out of the uttered words in their abstractness, did not note the contradiction of their meaning and interrelation, did not see that in nature there is no equality, cannot be freedom, that nature herself has established inequality of minds, of characters and capacities, just as immutably as she has established subordination to her laws. Never stop to think that the mob is a blind thing, that upstarts elected from among it to bear rule are, in regard to the political, the same blind men as the mob itself. That the adept, though he be a fool, can yet rule, whereas the non-adept, even if he were a genius, understands nothing in the political. To all these things the Goyim paid no regard, yet all the time it was based upon these things that dynastic rule rested. The father passed on to the son a knowledge of the course of political affairs, in such wise that none should know it but members of the dynasty, and none could betray it to the governed. In all corners of the earth the words liberty, equality, fraternity brought to our ranks, thanks to our blind agents, whole legions who bore our banners with enthusiasm. And all the time these words were cankerworms at work, boring into the well-being of the Goyim, putting an end everywhere to peace, quiet, solidarity, destroying all the foundations of the Goya states. As you will see later, this helped us to our triumph. It gave us the possibility, among other things, of getting into our hands the master card, the destruction of the privileges, or in other words, of the very existence of the aristocracy of the Goyim, that class which was the only defense peoples and countries had against us. So, the abstraction of freedom has enabled us to persuade the mob in all countries that their government is nothing but the steward of the people who are the owners of the country, and that the steward can be replaced like a worn-out glove. It is this possibility of replacing the representatives of the people which has placed them at our disposal, and, as it were, given us the power of appointment. Point is, Marxism, these ideas of equality, the fundamental principles of leftism are impossible to implement in reality. And even conceptually, they don't make sense. And what we see throughout history is that wherever these sorts of ideas are used to agitate the mob against the establishment, what happens afterwards is a group of certain international elites come in and they consolidate power. They generate a new order out of that chaos. And it's basically just a tool that they use to wipe the slate clean and make themselves supreme rulers. To wipe society, to wipe away the old order of society, to get people to reject the old order of society and to establish themselves as the heads of the new one. It's never been about equality. It's never been about workers' rights. And I mean, I made a video on this, Marx's elite connections. Marx was directly bankrolled by elite capitalists, industrialists, financialists, and even possibly related to the Rothschilds themselves. This video, if you want to check it out, Karl Marx's Elite Connections, shows his family genealogy. It shows who was financially investing in him. And oh, by the way, interesting one of my last points that I'll make here is Teen Vogue magazine, champion of the people, champion of workers' rights, arguing against these horrible right-wing big corporate interests that are controlling the universities. Well, guess what? Teen Vogue magazine is, their publisher is Condé Nast. Company that owns them is Advanced Publications. Condé Nast is also owned by Advanced Publications. And Advanced Publications is owned by Donald Newhouse, who is a billionaire, business magnate, top capitalist, and his family has owned a giant media empire for a very long time now. And guess what? He's part of the tribe. Surprise, surprise. So what we see here in the protocols, I think, is very accurate. It's very naive. Last thing I'll say is it is very naive to take these utopian political ideologies like Marxism and just the ideas of equality, of democracy, of freedom, and the collectivization of the means of production, workers seizing the means of production, and taxing the rich. We gotta tax the rich. We gotta make sure the people get their fair share. All these kinds of utopian, naive ideas. Their purpose will never be achieved. Their stated face value, surface level purpose will never be achieved because it's impossible, and the real purpose is occulted. The real purpose is hidden, and it's to actually destabilize society and to allow for this consolidation of power. And the last thing I'll say, a lot of people, like I mentioned earlier, in the dissident right or third positionist sort of circles, like to argue that the elites are capitalists, that society right now is capitalist. But that cannot be further from the truth. Society is owned by a group of Kabbalists, not capitalists. And these Kabbalists will use any strategy, any political ideology that is necessary in that moment, in that specific region in that context to further their consolidation of power. And I'm going to make a video on this also soon, that you can look forward to, which is if society is owned by capitalists, there's a lot of contradictions that come along. One was in this video here. If they're capitalists, why are they promoting Marxism and critical theory? But also another one is, if they're capitalists, why are they promoting a depopulation agenda? And I'm going to make a video on that as well soon, because that's another important point. So look forward to that. But the point is that they're not capitalists. They're not even really socialists or Marxists, because there's no such thing. Marxism is an illusion, a dream that is used to manipulate the goyim. It's used to manipulate people, to get them to do things, to overthrow the structures of society, to allow the Kabbalist despots to come into power. So there's really no such thing as a capitalist or a Marxist. There's just this group of oligarchs. There's this group of elites following a religious self-image, and they use whatever means are necessary, whatever strategies are required to consolidate this power. So anyway, I think that's about all I have to say for today. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.